So can you imagine, Jason? I know that I took. It's funny, and this is what reminded me was I was going through the comments to the previous videos, and somebody apologized for jumping on me a few months ago when I didn't rank Oklahoma that high. They said you were right, and it wasn't about me being right or anything. I was just ranking them where I thought it was appropriate based on their performance. And now with this team playing in the Alamo Bowl, can you imagine if we would have predicted Oklahoma to play in the Alamo Bowl
Oh my
during the
gosh.
offseason?
Yeah. No, I mean, we would have all, we
People.
would have, yeah, we would have been, both of us would have been hated and we would have been just kind of laughed off of here, I'm sure. But,
So
well,
yes, this was
I
not
mean,
anticipated.
no,
Alamo Bowl.
no, definitely. I mean, for either side, right? I mean, even before these last few games, Oklahoma was right there, and so was Oregon. Oregon were they high as number 2 at one point, at least number
Yeah,
3.
late in the process. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's interesting, and I this matchup is so we talked about this off air. I don't know how much either school really cares that too much about this game. I mean, especially based on what's going on with both sides um coaching wise, with especially Oregon still in limbo um right now, which is just one of the, I don't know. I mean, I feel for Oregon fans and their kids, and it seems like that was just. I mean, Miami handled it really, really bad, but I don't know that Cristobal handled it much better individually himself. Um, so yeah, I think it's in two interim coaches coaching in this game. Oklahoma, it's going to be interesting to see who even calls plays on the defensive side of the ball for Oklahoma, with them, completely. I'd heard that some of the defensive staff is will potentially coach Oklahoma, at least a couple of them in the bowl game. So I think that helps from a kind of a continuity perspective. Wouldn't be surprised if Calvin Thibodeau and Jamar Cain and maybe even Brian Odom are there coaching for the bowl game at least. So I think that'll be good. So I think Oklahoma, luckily, I think they came into a situation that's kind of maybe even more crazy than what they're going through. So I mean, and of course, you never know. With Oklahoma's already had two. Nick Benito and Perrion Winfrey have opted out of the bowl game and have decided to go to put their name in the NFL, which was expected on both side on both of those kids. So it'll be very interesting to watch this game with that. And Oklahoma has a few kids that I'd mentioned on the offensive side of the ball that have already that are hit the transfer portal. So it'll be a very entertaining game, I think, for sure.
Yeah, the Alamo Bowl has been a first class bowl game for quite some time. And when I say first class, that doesn't mean it's a first tier bowl game. It's typically in that 3 to 4 seed in each conference of the Pac 12 and the Big 12. And it's been a Big 12 Pac 12 matchup for quite a long time. The Big 10 used to be involved, but it's been Pac 12 and Big 12 for, I'd have to run through my Rolodex memory, but somewhere in the range of a decade. And there have been some really good bowl games in this series of the Alamo Bowl. And I'm sure that the Alamo Bowl people themselves, the officials, are pretty happy with the matchup from a name brand standpoint. They don't typically get this type of matchup from a name standpoint on both sides. You had Texas, Colorado last year. That wasn't much of a game.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, you've had a lot of TCUs and I don't know, Stanford's been there. They actually played an epic game about 5 years ago where one of them was in front. I think Stanford had this enormous lead and TCU came storming back. And Oregon and TCU also had a game in which it was some crazy 30-point spread and one of them came back and won the game. So that happened in the span of like 3 or 4 years. So the Alamo Bowl's always been a tremendous game, Pac-12 and Big 12. And it's kind of funny from a coaching standpoint. It's going to be quite the throwback with Mike Bellotti coaching the Oregon team. So Mike Bellotti is pre-Chip Kelly
Mhm.
Oregon coach for a long time there, and of course Bob Stoops on the Oklahoma side. While I'm sure there are going to be all sorts of opt-outs, I know Kayvon Thibodeau, who's
Mhm.
arguably the best defensive player in the country, has opted out on the Oregon side. I haven't heard of any others yet, but
No, I haven't either. That was
so
yeah, that's the only one that I heard too.
we'll get acquainted with a lot of young players, as is becoming the norm here during bowl season.
Well, I think it's interesting to your point, Mark. I don't know that I'll have to go back and look, but I don't think Oklahoma's actually ever played in the Alamo Bowl. So
I don't
they
think so
played
either.
not in the bowl game itself. I know there was a Big 12 championship game, I think 2017. Oklahoma defeated Missouri, which was at the Alamo Dome there, but they've never played in the Alamo Bowl itself. So, yeah, it should be. I mean, in a relatively, I don't know what from a fan base perspective. I mean, sure there'll be a lot of people that are interested just to go attend to see Bob Stoops coach again, and just as part of that dynamic within the Oklahoma program, and just being fairly close in proximity to Norman, but I mean specific way more than Eugene for sure. But yeah, so have with that being, I think there's still a lot of interest, and I think there's a lot of with kind of the energy that was sapped out, with Lincoln Riley leaving. I think the energy is much higher back to where it was, and maybe even a little bit more so than what it was before for Oklahoma fans. So I would assume that most Oklahoma fans would travel well for this game.
I'm looking at the history of the games, and it's bringing back a lot of memories. So it's sparking my memory to a lot of these games. And the first Alamo Bowl was in 1993, and it was Big Ten Pac-12. But then the contract kicked in with the Big 12 the next year. So starting in 1994 and going forward, it's always been a Big 12 team, and it was a Big 12 Big Ten matchup for quite a long time until we got to. Looks like it was 2010 was the first Big 12 Pac-12 game, and it's been those two conferences ever since. But to your point, Oklahoma State, Baylor, Texas, Kansas State, TCU, Oklahoma State, TCU, Iowa State, Texas the last 2 years, beating Utah and Colorado. So no Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah, it's a different age, a different situation. Than I mean, obviously disappointing just in terms of what initially based on what the expectations were for this team, but given given everything that's happened, here over the last couple of weeks, I think it'll be a breath of fresh air. And just one additional thing that I wanted to point out here that I've kind of saw in terms of the details with Jeff Levy that just wanted to point out is, I think there's been some thoughts in the past that Oklahoma, just as a program, has not necessarily always been willing to pay the amount of money that they need to get the best staff members. I think that's been it's been proven out from time to time, but I just saw the details on the Jeff Levy hire. He's going to be making around $2 million here at Oklahoma, which makes him one of, if not the highest paid offensive coordinator in the country. So I think for Oklahoma fans that have a little bit of misgivings, really understand, okay, you know, Oklahoma's not necessarily willing to do what they need to do um, to be a top program from that perspective. And then, I mean, we all know the insane amount of money that these SEC teams are paying coordinators and position coaches, and Oklahoma's got to be in a position. Obviously, they don't have access to that SEC money as of yet, but it looks like they're willing to do what they need to do to be competitive and and get the guys that they need to have on this staff. So I think that's probably a breath of fresh air for most people, for most fans, just kind of thinking about that.